Well, g'day everybody. It's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and welcome to our Tuesday 7 p.m. Broadcast for March the 21st. I had to look at the calendar. It's 21st of March. Who could believe this? This year is rocketing past so quickly. And boy, did we have an exciting weekend this past weekend. The AOPA Australia team were out at Wagga Wagga, of all places, joining the Wagga City Aero Club for an absolutely awesome pilot safety education and seminar series that they put together. And I'll throw a bit of a photograph up here. The team out there at Wagga did an absolutely awesome job of bringing together a lineup of speakers to cover everything from fuel management through to airspace and planning, EFB use, ADSB implementation for VFR, a whole pile of really great information. So on behalf of all of our members around the countryside and our board of directors, I do extend a sincere thanks and appreciation to Jeff Bruce and the committee of the Aero Club. They are great supporters of us as an advocacy and as an organisation, and it's always wonderful to get out there at the grassroots. And I also have to say thank you to McKenzie, who flew his beautiful RV9 out to Wagga to catch up with everyone. It was great to have him on site as well, being able to interact with pilots and take questions on a whole broad range of aviation issues that we're working on at AOPA. So thank you, everybody. Well, tonight's broadcast is going to be a focus on flight training. And this evening, we've brought along none other than Maddy Johnson from the Australian Flight Training Industry Association. Maddy, welcome.
Good morning, good evening, wherever anyone is, if they're tuning in other parts of the world. Thanks, Ben, for having me on.
Maddy, I didn't think it was possible for an industry association to have an even larger name than the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia.
Well, that was one thing that we wanted to beat you on. Yep. So we did our best.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. This is your first broadcast with AOPA Live, and I hope it's going to be the start of many to come. You've found yourself in the chair as the representative for flight training schools across this great nation. But maybe before we delve into the work that the Flight Training Industry Association is working on, we could just talk a little bit about your aviation background and experience, because you two are involved in aviation. You're running a flight training school down out of Mudgee Airport, and that certainly is a location that's got a lot of challenges going on right now. So maybe just give us a little bit of a background there.
Okay, so a bit of a background on me. Flight training for over 20 years. We were an RTO for over 10 years now as well. And during that time, I've been on technical working groups with CASA, industry standards consult with regards to the development of courses for aviation, diplomas, etc. Worked with the Department of Infrastructure, Victorian government, particularly during COVID, part of skills summits in Canberra. So really spending a lot of time grassroots in actually dealing directly with the students and their progress, but also dealing with the highest stuff up, the really strategic things on how we need to move forward, how do we work with the regulator to make the things easier for us to process in the real world, because logistically some of the things that we have to do are quite challenging within the regulations. So working with CASA to try and work out ways to move those forward.
Well, look, it's vitally important in and amongst the industry association groups that we have people not only within the rank and file, but also from the committee of management, the boards that are involved in the aviation industry and highly experienced. And so you're somebody that has definitely your hands and feet well and truly on the controls in the flight training world. So that's a huge positive for your members and also for the flight training industry to have access to you. I was joking earlier with McKenzie that it's a small group of us amongst the industry leadership, the industry associations and representative bodies that we're working during the day in business, largely right across aviation and all these areas, that we're also then at night time for many hours fighting for, I guess, reform and deregulation and moving the industry forward. So on behalf of everyone, I really do thank you for the hours that you put in. And I know that you and I have had an enormous number of telephone calls on flight training issues, and it's just great that we've got someone there.
Yeah, exactly. No, look, we have to put that time in and we have to be passionate about it. Absolutely. Because the changes that have been forced upon us over the last 10 years has been enormous, and we need to work together to come up with a better way forward.
Well, look, the working together is actually a really key point as well, and that is industry associations and bodies do need to get round the table, so to speak, and to get the issues on the table so that they can be debated. That probably leads me to a very interesting point of discussion, and that is the federal government did announce that it would be moving forward with the I guess the development and the implementation of a white paper for aviation. And I understand that you've just participated in one of the roundtable events that are going on around the country. I think the Sydney event's going to be kicking off on Thursday. I'll be there with a fellow AOPA Australia representative putting our views and opinions and requests forward. Could you tell me a little bit about that process for the flight training industry, and maybe what some of the key issues that your association feels are needing to be fielded by the government in this next review?
Okay, so the roundtable probably had about 25 people in the room of varying backgrounds, and it was a bit frustrating. I felt like it was very strategic, and they were looking at where do we need to be in 2030 and 2050. And as much as I absolutely agree, we need to be looking at what is the technology that is available to us? How do we change the regulations so we can bring all of that into our everyday, using the regulations to come up with a better product? If we don't deal with the here and now and work out how to actually get to next week and to next month and then to next year, then looking at 2050 is really irrelevant. There is so much disaster that we're still trying to mop up coming out of COVID, and pre-COVID we had skills shortages, and then this has just been exacerbated. So I think from an education point of view, we need to bring education to the table, we need to bring Department of Infrastructure to the table, and then they need to inform CASA that they need to come to the table as well, so we can actually produce a product that is well educated, fit for purpose, and ready for industry, but also to not have the pilots particularly, but if we're talking about lamies as well, coming out and taking 3 years to do something that they can get done in 18 months. And instead of spending $150,000, that we need to come up with a better model. So they're not sort of spending $150,000 to have a job that's going to pay them 50. And it's going to be 10 years before they're going to have some kind of income. So there's a lot of changes that need to happen. The strategic side of things, they were talking about sustainability, they were talking about, electric vehicles. It was really great stuff to be talking about. But for us to get there, we need to make sure that we can get to next week. That was the frustrating part.
Look, I agree with you, and you and I have spent quite a few hours, some of it being very passionate conversations about we need to move the here and the now. We are not going to have a general aviation industry in 30 years' time if we don't start focusing and resolving many of the now issues, which can be solved and can be solved quickly if we could get the right people around the table to get it done. And that really is a key that you've just raised there. You have to get the infrastructure, the CASA and the ministerial representatives at the table to understand that the now issues are actually going to do more damage than the issues we're going to face in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. I had a guest on the program here last week, or it would have been the week before, discussing the dire situation that's facing flight examiners and people wanting to pursue flight examiner ratings, not being able to get them done in a timely fashion, needing to spend upwards of a year, 2 years trying to navigate the mentoring processes. We need to look at how we can inject a great number of flight instructors into the general aviation economy, because we have to face the reality that we're losing so many of our pilots to the airlines. And it's not just the flight training industry that's feeling this. I got a telephone call this week already from an operator saying, Ben, I desperately need help. We've just lost our head of flight operations. They've taken a job with Qantas. I've got a number of smaller GA charter operators saying, Ben, I don't know what to do. Where are we going to find pilots? They're all taking jobs with the airlines. And for probably... And I want to caveat by saying that we've obviously been losing pilots out of Australia as well to international carriers. That's always been happening, but probably not as much as is happening right now. Overseas airlines are looking at the Australian market and they're saying this is a prime space to poach. And so for the first time, in my opinion, we're now facing the perfect storm. We have a global aviation economy emerging from this massive pandemic. They're all hungry for pilots. They're hungry for maintainers. They're hungry for aviation professionals. And Australia has just become a I guess, a location to strip, and it's leaving general aviation businesses in a very unfortunate position where the labour markets are accelerating and we can no longer afford to employ key personnel, and that the rigidity of the CASA system means that without them, we can't function. So this is really quite a diabolical situation to be left in.
It absolutely is. And one of the other things that we talked about was we need to make sure that aviation is considered an essential service, because if we don't, from a ministerial point of view, then it just makes all of the things that we're trying to do so much harder for them to acknowledge. Our sovereign training infrastructure is in a catastrophic situation at the moment. We have lost so much experience, and it's experience that we've lost through people wanting to now move into a different industry. That was one of the things that we spoke about in small group today, that there are pilots who have decided to move into another industry because they don't want to go back. And that's really sad to start off with, because we had passionate people and all of a sudden they've gone, well, I haven't been treated well and I've now found something else, so I'm going to stick with that. We haven't advertised our industry well at all. And there's just been so much negative press that even if you were thinking, let's move into aviation, often I call it's a very nuclear industry, in that if you've got a family member who is part of the aviation industry, then that will draw you to it. But those parents are now saying, go and do something else. They're saying, particularly over the last 2 years. So we've got this huge hole that we're now trying to fill. And our training infrastructure is so broken. Trying to bring new aircraft in, that's hard in itself. We don't have the same kind of economic support that America does for our industry. So fuel subsidies, you can depreciate your aircraft in a much greater rate over there. So for us here to actually try and grow our businesses, it's twice as hard than it is in other parts of the world. So we do have a really good product. We are known for having an exceptional product that the other parts of the world want. America opened up before we did, and you're right, they were smart enough to go, hey, E3 visas, we're going to pay people so much more. We'll do relocation bonuses. So they are jumping ship over to the US, and so we're losing that skill and that knowledge here in Australia to pass on to others, and therefore the industry, as they move up, drawing people out sooner and sooner, particularly from flight schools. They used to take them as grade 1s. Pre-COVID, they were taking them as grade 2s. Now they're taking them as not even grade 2s. They'll take grade 3s, or they won't even become instructors. They'll just take them straight as commercial pilots. It can be great for our industry to have that kind of flow through, but we don't have the robustness at the moment to be producing a quality product, because our skill level, unfortunately, throughout the whole industry has been diluted, unfortunately.
One of the other things that I've seen in the past, Maddy, and this has been an issue you and I have discussed, is that we have an opportunity with Australia's airlines for the airlines to be playing a significant role in helping lead the recovery with the flight training industry. But unfortunately, the airlines appear to be focused on helping themselves and focusing on their own operations, rather than looking to the diverse multitude of flight training outlets that could also become feeders for them. I noticed the Qantas announcement recently that with the increased demand on pilot training, Qantas was requesting further support from the Commonwealth and arguing that if they could gain that support, they would consider opening a second Qantas-owned flight school. I don't necessarily see that as the most sensible pathway. Qantas could be partnering up with a multitude of flight schools, and I look at it a little bit weirdly, but I would tender to the Qantas board, hey, the Australian taxpayer just gave you, as part of the $5.4 billion taxpayer-funded bailout of the airlines during COVID, don't you think you could partner up with a few Australian flight schools and pass on the free money that the hard-working Australians gave you during your time of need? And I find it weird. I really do find it weird that our very own Commonwealth government are not suggesting this, and they're not saying, hey, listen, Qantas, taxpayer gave you enormous amounts of funding. Same for Rex and the others. They got staggering levels of funding. How about they get together and they start building a broad national alliance with flight schools and start supporting the general aviation industry that they've so eagerly strip mined over the years for their own benefit?
I'd really like to see more collaboration. You know that that's where my heart lies, in that I really think that we should be collaborating between all sectors, because as an industry, we are very destructive of ourselves. Now, if we can get every sector to work together, so you've got foundation flight training, small charter operators, bigger charter operators, regional airlines, aeromedical, into the major airlines, we need to have pathway programs for pilots for a number of reasons. If we get that pipeline actually functioning well, then the training that they will be receiving down at foundation level will be at a greater standard and specifically targeted on the correct kind of training, so there's no negative training further up in their airline jobs and in the training that they have to go through there. So this isn't just, hey, let's just pull people through more quickly, or let's have you work together. It has a very much overarching benefit to everybody. For if you have a pilot coming through in flight school and they have a pathway program that they know is going to work for them, they're more likely to not be always looking outside their current job. Where's my next one? Where's my next one? I have to take that if it comes along. And they generally will leave their previous employer in a bit of catastrophe, because they've got to jump ship so quickly because, I've got to be told I've got to do this too fast. There's no handover. So these collaborations, these pathway pipeline programs, and also for those who are further up the stream to be helping those further down. So if we have those in the middle sector, as I call it, the GA sector, actually putting back into the flight training schools with some experience, some knowledge, some upskilling, and then the major airlines doing the same thing for those who they are pulling out, who are examiners, who are grade 1 multi-engine IFR instructors, to say to them, all right, we're going to let you work back down in foundation flight school. Not only would it increase the capabilities of those flight schools, it would mean that they would have a better product because they're bringing back airline philosophy. So the students are getting a better product out of their flight school, and the airlines then themselves would have a better product when they received it in 3 to 5 years' time.
Another one of the issues, Maddy, that we could touch on, and I'm just conscious of your time here this evening, and I do thank you for giving up your Tuesday evening to speak with us all. One of the issues that I see that we could address in the here and the now is that there are a number of highly qualified, useful flying instructors that have been benched over this last 5 years due to AVMED being excessively onerous and restrictive on that class 1 and class 2 medical application. Reform by CASA in this space to enable our flight instructors to get back into this industry where their skill sets can be used to help reconsolidate aviation and launch it for another 10 years of growth. This seems like a really logical pathway and something we should be tapping on. Do you have a thought towards that?
AVMED, they are a bit of a challenging bunch, unfortunately. They have their structure and rules that they must follow, and unfortunately it doesn't always tend to fit with what industry requirements are, particularly with the timelines of things. I think if we're going to be looking further into the future and saying that we need to work with technology, and simulators are really where we can help bolster our training sector for sustainability, because that seems to be very much the buzzword at the moment. We must become more sustainable. So if we were looking at that, why would an instructor require a medical at all? There is no jeopardy attached with anything that they will be doing. So I think we do need to be looking at AVMED and the medical requirements of instructors and actually align it to what is safe and what is needed for us to be able to function. We need to be commercial. We need to be able to make a living out of this. We need to be sustainable for the future, and that knowledge transfer needs to occur and not be lost, which it has been over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. It's just people are moving through too quickly. So any time that we can bring back. Now, AFTIA has been working on what we call a project boomerang. So it's actually bringing people back into flight training sector and working with CASA to say, okay, if people have had flight instruction while they've been in airline world but not in GA world, what can we do to bring them back and allow them to use that knowledge and that skill set down in this sector? Now, we're not going to put them in and get them to do straight and level because they haven't had experience at that. But IF training, for example, multi-engine training, that's where they live. So we just need to bring them back in sectors that are safe, that they have the skill set for. And medicals is another point, isn't it? That what are the medical requirements for the different jobs that we're wanting people to do?
And of course, I could sit here and ask you 1,000 questions about how do we get flight training back into remote and regional townships. We need to get the aero clubs mobilised again. We need to get flight instructors back training. There is a real argument that Australia could basically look to the system in the United States and really gain some positive buoyancy for flight training by getting flight instructors out into the field, decoupling those individuals from the full and onerous requirements of 141, 142 to help again inject growth and buoyancy back into this market. But Maddy, I won't hit you with those now, but how about you make me a promise you'll come back in the not too distant future and let's start examining some of these topics and pulling them apart. But in the meantime, if you're a flight training school, you're a flying instructor, and you're passionate about the flight training industry, I really do encourage you to reach out to Maddy. Her email address is on the screen now, maddy.johnson@aftia.org.au. It'll pay you to jump online and connect. And as I said, if you're a flight training school, you might already be a member of AOPA, but there's nothing stopping you also getting in there and becoming a member of AFTIA and helping support a push to make the flight training industry, as Maddy has said tonight, more profitable and more sustainable. So thank you, Maddy, for your time this evening. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, look, it's a pleasure. We are very passionate at AFTIA about what we need to do to be very collective and collaborative through all sectors, from foundation flying schools all the way up into high capacity RPT. And I'm here to chat with anybody. Please send me an email. Happy to get back to you.
No doubt I'll be attending Thursday's white paper and you can expect my call.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
looking forward to it.
Okay,
bye.
Okay, that was Maddy Johnson from the Australian Flight Training Industry Association. She's a fantastic representative, very passionate about general aviation, and has been one of those great people in the background that I've been able to reach out to at times and discuss issues pertaining to the flight training sector. Well, our next guest is no stranger to AOPA Live. G'day, Clinton. How are you going?
Well, thanks, Ben. And I'm sure I'm not alone in having spent most of that cheering for Maddy and nodding and supporting everything he said. I mean, it is, we have to get across the fact that aviation in all its forms is essential. And there's a reason for it being part of the cultural DNA of the USA, because the USA realizes that aviation capability is at the heart of their superpower status and their economic success. And that's from grassroots all the way up to space shuttles. And
well, Clinton, a great example of this, mate. And it's so poignant to just discuss this quickly. And we've got a few things we need to dive into tonight. But a lot of people would remember that I was trying to get a couple of Cessna 152 Aerobats refurbished. They were private airplanes that I owned, and I was diving into the restoration of those aircraft because I wanted to get them up and going, and I thought we might be able to use them through AOPA to try and create some engagement with young people. And I still do believe we need to be doing something like this. But of course, going into COVID, our financial situation has very much changed. So that type of thing's going to have to be on the back burner for a little bit. But just before COVID broke out, I was approached by an individual out of the Philippines who contacted me and said, Ben, my name is blah, blah. I'd like to buy all your Cessnas. And I thought this is a joke to begin with. But I actually, in the end, sold all of the aircraft out of Australia and into the Philippines. And the initiative that the individual was running was just nothing short of profound. The Philippine government had come to the realization that there was a benefit in stimulating, growing, and anchoring the Philippine economy with a general aviation footprint that would help underpin the capacity of the Philippines to participate in aircraft maintenance and aviation technology, along with flight training and flying careers. And as everyone would realise, the Philippine nation is a growing nation with millions of people living there. Their standard of living is rising. And it was a really smart initiative. Now, what has happened? This one person, who's just one of a multitude, has started up an apprenticeship training program, pulled a whole pile of young apprentices together, and is buying up, with the assistance of the Philippine government, buying up aircraft, and then they are running a full-on aircraft refitting and refurbishing program and injecting these completely remanufactured aircraft into the local flight training economy where things are rocking and rolling. And he recently sent me photographs and videos of the refurbished airplanes, and they've been refurbished to such a high standard. They're incredible. And I just think to myself, how is it that we can be so far from the mark in this country? We're such a first world nation. We're such a developed country, yet we fail to appreciate that in order to maintain your status as a developed nation, you have to maintain skills, you have to maintain capability. And as Maddy has said, you need sovereign capability instead of becoming this outsourcing nation, which we seem almost determined to become. So my hat goes off to them. But at the same time, I'm deeply saddened that I too was contributing to the eventual decline of general aviation, because in the end, I had no viable pathway to refurbish the aircraft in Australia. The engine overhaul workshops out of Sydney have all closed. What do? You throw your hands in the air and you say it's just become too difficult and it's become way too expensive. We need to solve this. And it would seem to me that maybe the Australian Commonwealth, if the Department of Infrastructure is so keen for a white paper and to look at what we need to do, how about we start looking at possibly a third world country and we start learning from them on how you build an industry and create success? Because doing what our mob have been doing is actually leading us astray. That's another side issue, but I just thought an opportune moment to mention it. Now, to kick us off, Clinton, our first point of discussion tonight, we might cover the ADSB for VFR rebate. Now, it was timely that we kind of ended up in some internal conversations within the AOPA board on this issue, because we'd been approached by a number of members who were expressing concerns that they were seeking to apply for the rebate that's available under the program. And at the moment, the federal government is running a ADSB for VFR initiative where they are funding up to $5,000 or 50% up to $5,000 of the costs of getting ADSB or an ADSB solution for your VFR aeroplane. Now that qualifies as either a portable EC, electronic conspicuity device, or a full ADSB suite into the aircraft. And then, of course, when you and I attended the Wagga City Aero Club Pilot Safety Seminar, we had the opportunity to listen to Jan, or is it Jan? I think it's Jan Goosen, who's in charge of ADSB for CASA, give a presentation on the technology, the devices that are available, and of course, how the program's rolling out. So I might throw it over to you now and you can give us a bit more of a lowdown on what's happening.
Yes, well, it was a very interesting day at Wagga all round, but Jan, I think it's Jan Goosen's attendance from CASA was a very, very interesting presentation, and I hadn't got into too much on the ADSB subsidy issue until a couple of things came up, as you say, internally in AOPA about people having difficulties. And then I started looking at the guidelines and the application forms and all that sort of stuff. And also a couple of people raised some issues at the Wagga seminar day, or the get-together day, which I think everyone would benefit from understanding, because my understanding is there's only 5 million out of the potential 30 million that has been spent so far on the subsidy, and it will end on the 31st of May this year, although you might want to brief people on the moves that are afoot to try to extend it. So the as you say, the subsidy is for half of the cost of the ADSB, eligible ADSB equipment, up to a maximum of $5,000. But as we found, there are some do's and do not do's, and I'd like to talk to some of those things, because The guidelines, which are treated as set in concrete rules, are 18 pages long, and the application form is 14 pages long. And in this day and age of everything done so computerized, it says, don't submit the application until it's complete. You can't correct a mistake. You see, so I'm just reading off the website. Now, one of the first things to understand is I'll give CASA a good caning when I think it deserves it, but the rules and the process are being run not by CASA. It's set up by, I think, the Department of Industry, Resources, or one of those departments, and the funding's coming out of the Commonwealth. So any bureaucratic barriers to getting the subsidy is not CASA's fault. They've obviously convinced, and Air Services convinced the government of the benefit of the subsidy. So the things that we've learned so far is, as we know, one of them imported some eligible equipment, but direct from the USA, and did not get an Australian tax invoice. And one of the criteria that is strictly enforced to get the subsidy is, and this is down at eligibility criteria, paragraph 4, I think it starts, an Australian tax invoice, whatever that is. I know what a tax invoice. I mean a tax invoice issued by in Australia by someone with an ABN. So it looks like that this person will have to sell what he's imported to someone so that they can sell it back to him to get a tax invoice, probably with some GST added to it to cover whoever's issuing the tax invoices GST liabilities. So there's a warning number one. Don't, or if you're going to import the equipment directly, you need to make sure that you get a tax invoice from whoever's selling it to you if you can, or you need to organise it so that you can sell it to someone and they can sell it to you, so you can get a tax invoice. Because if you don't have the tax invoice for the equipment and the installation if necessary, then they're not going to pay it. There was also someone at the Wagga seminar that said they got something wrong. They got names wrong. So, you know, the aircraft was registered to Bob, and the equipment was bought with a tax invoice that had Bob and Jane on it, or something like that. So. The rules are obviously very, very pedantic, and so you have to be very, very careful to make sure that, like AVMED, you don't give them an excuse to intervene and crush and stop and throw things out and make you start again. The other practical issue, which I'd be interested in getting feedback from anybody out there, is that someone said, there's actually a supply chain difficulty. Most of this, well, I think all of this equipment comes from overseas. And if it's not on the shelf to be bought, it's pretty hard to buy it and get it installed. So I don't know the explanation for the relatively low take-up. But if anybody out there is desperately wanting to install ADS-B in their VFR aircraft, but can't find the equipment they want for love nor money, then let us know, because that should be a basis upon which we should be able to go to the. That's another argument for asking for an extension in the subsidy period, because it's a bit hard to take the subsidy up if you can't get the equipment in the first place. I've decided after the weekend, I'm going to give it a go. I found a supplier of the electronic conspicuity device, portable device, that I'm going to buy, relatively inexpensive by aircraft measures. This thing's only one aircraft maintenance monetary unit, i.e. $1,000. So, and it's portable. I'm going to get that, see how it goes, and use that as the crash test dummy for the subsidy application process. And if I learn anything of my own lessons out of that, then I'll let everyone know as well. So again, key point there, if anyone wants to do this and is trying to do it but cannot get a supply of the actual gizmo that they want to fit, and Cass has got a list of the gizmos that are eligible and that's available. If you can't get it, then let us know, because that's an important thing. And the other thing to note is, again, Jan was kind enough to give his email address at the seminars, and he was very, very willing to address any questions that anyone has from a technical perspective.
Yeah, the other one, did you mention the Sport Aircraft Association guy building the airplane, which was quite interesting? He was not able to make the claim because he was the builder of the aircraft, the manufacturer, and he couldn't install the ADS-B technology into his own aircraft because the way the grant system's structured, you have to be an approved installer, and he wasn't recognised by the department as an approved installer, yet he is the manufacturer of the airplane. So there's a few things that need to be ironed out, obviously, in this. And I guess just to follow on, I'll just put Jan's email up on screen. If you have some feedback regarding the ADS-B for VFR program, by all means send Jan an email. You might want to ask him a question or two. Fire it off. He will do his best to get to everybody. And I have to say, I really do thank Jan for making himself available at Wagga to take the questions. He did demonstrate that he was very open to the issues that are going on and was very supportive to seeking an extension. And just on that topic, we both kind of walked away from that presentation, Clinton, thinking there's got to be something done here. The numbers that I was able to present at the information day was that out of the $30 million, approximately $5 million has been invested by the Commonwealth into the rebate so far. Only around 500 applications have been made under the program. And of course, if you look at it from a performing, underperforming type perspective, the current rebate scheme is underperforming enormously. And I think it's fair to say that the rebate scheme was launched at a time when people are just coming out of COVID. They don't necessarily have all the free money in the world to be throwing it at a VFR upgrade to the aeroplane. As things are starting to normalise, people are obviously wanting to get on with it. Product supplies, inavailability in the Australian market, some of these other concerns around invoices. Are they Australian tax invoices? Are they overseas invoices? They need to be sorted out. So from an AOPA perspective, on behalf of our members in the industry, we'll be writing not only to Jan, but we'll be sending communication through the department requesting that that potentially the time limitation be taken off this program. I think it would be a reasonable outcome to say that there has been a budget allocated to improve safety for VFR aircraft, and that rebate scheme should simply remain in place until such time as the budget expires. So if there's $30 million on the table, 5 already spent, until the balance of that money is spent, the program realistically should stay running, and that will accommodate a whole raft of VFR aircraft operations over the next 12 months and 2 years. And ultimately, if this is about safety and that this is what everyone's seeking to achieve, they really shouldn't be opposing it. The budget was approved. Let's just try and encourage as many aircraft owners as possible. And I know, Clinton, both you and I, coming away from the Wagga forum, we're both discussing, okay, what solutions are these? You know, this is interesting stuff. Let's have a look at what's on the table. I know my father-in-law, he was at the presentation and he's already looking at an ADS-B for VFR solution for his glass, I think it's a Glass Air Sportsman. So plenty of people want to dive into this. Time has been of the essence. So we'll be doing all that we can to try and get that extension.
Yeah, two things. When I got back to my hangar, one of my mates has got his aircraft here, but it's got numbers on the tail. I had a chat with him about the subsidy and that he would qualify. And he just said to me, because I said, I'm going to order one of these on Monday. He said, order 2 and I'll pay you back. So we'll see how it goes.
So just one second. Mark Kyle's just thrown a comment in there. He's saying it's not correct. I'm building mine I'm the approved installer. You sign the form yourself. I got the grant. It's great news, Mark, that you got it. Unfortunately, the guy at the presentation, he had his documentation and his responses from the Commonwealth there. So you might have got someone who truly understood what that means to be the owner, builder, manufacturer. In the particular example for the gentleman at Wagga, he was denied. So it's great news that you've been able to get yours approved. And of course, you should get it approved. It's exactly what the program is designed to do. But again, it's one of the reasons why we want to follow up with the department to get the extension, because there's been miscommunication, and no doubt there's probably others. We just need to try and get this thing ironed out so everyone has the best possible chance of getting access to the program. Clinton?
I was going to say, Jan Goosen made a very important safety point, which I'm glad he did, and I've nodded vigorously. He said, by the way, these are things that are fitted to VFR aircraft, and we all need to keep our head out of the cockpit and see where we're going, not be staring at gizmos. It's a conspicuity device. It's being subsidised to make VFR aircraft more conspicuous to other aircraft. And us flying VFR need to know visual flight rules means eyes out of the cockpit and watching where we're going, not staring at all the pretty coloured symbols on a screen in the cockpit.
The other thing that we should mention from the Wagga City Aero Club Pilot Education Forum was that Bevan Anderson from AvPlan EFB was in attendance, and he gave some great presentations on the AvPlan EFB software. And of course, spoke passionately about AvPlan EFB's desire to see visibility between all the EFB products. And I know Bevan made a real point of informing everyone that AvPlan EFB have in fact reached out to the other EFB providers and have offered them the data if they do it in return. And as Bevan has openly said, at the moment, there's been a refusal by Oz Runways to come to the table and make that visibility data available. And I believe there could be some kind of concern there regarding should it be a licensing fee or etc. In my opinion, it's something I've written multiple articles on in the past. This data should be regarded as essential safety data, and the EFB providers really have a responsibility to the aviation flying community to make that data available so that everyone's EFBs can see everybody else's EFBs on the device. That is a simple, easy to achieve safety outcome that will enhance overall system safety for aviation. And as you're absolutely correct there, Clinton, it raised my ears as well when Jan started discussing the fact that, hey, listen, as VFR pilots, you are actually supposed to maintain see and avoid. That is your primary objective, and that these devices don't replace that. And I would stress this, that right now, you see it all the time. VFR aircraft now have got iPads everywhere and they've got everything happening in the dash. You've got to keep those eyes outside the airplane. You've got to be looking for traffic. The ADS-B picture is not the full picture, because right now it's not a mandated technology, which means not everyone is using it. There are going to be aircraft around you that just simply don't have this technology. And also, the other side of this that I found that was very interesting as well was in relation to the output of some of the portable devices. Jan was really discussing how some of these EC devices really don't have a very powerful output. So you don't get necessarily the full picture that you're going to be getting with in-dash solutions, and that the portable devices as well were also easy to interfere. If you had aircraft that had a chrome steel molly tube frame, it would interfere with the signals. If you had anything in the forward windscreen that potentially could block the aerial, it would interfere with the signal. So there was quite a bit of powerful information that was disclosed by Jan in that presentation, or Jan in that presentation, that I thought was really useful for pilots in understanding what might be the best technology to fit to their aircraft. And of course, the very best technology is always going to be a panel mount solution with the most powerful aerial and ADS-B output that you can get. But of course, things like the UAvionics Tail Beacon X and their matched AV30 devices, there's some fantastic products out there. And I really do encourage everyone, take advantage of the rebate. I can tell you this, AOPA fought our ass off to make sure that this rebate program would be delivered to the industry. We really put in a big effort, and I have to thank Anita Taylor, who was the aviation advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. Anita, behind the scenes, did an amazing job of providing encouragement around it, and also our colleagues, Andrew Anderson and those involved in the GAN, who supported and made recommendations for this program to be delivered to the industry. We all unfortunately missed out in the big grand ADSB rebate that should have been delivered when the technology was initially adopted and rolled out, but this is certainly a good opportunity to put some money back in your pocket for improving safety. Don't disagree?
Yeah. Well, I agree, and I learned something today too, actually, from Jeff Bruce at Wagga, that if you look at your certificate of registration for your aircraft, it's got an ICAO hex code on it already, which has already been allocated, because setting these things up, you've got to put in a hex code. And I went, well, what is the hex code for my aircraft? And Jeff said, well, have a look at your certificate of registration. And lo and behold, down the bottom of it, which I'd never seen before, is the hex code for the RV9A.
I noticed, I'll just quickly go back to it. Mark Kyle says, yes, it should be. Baz has refused, and it's a super safety add-on for everyone. CASA should step in and make it a rule to share the data. Look, Mark, I wrote a piece back when we lost those 2 aircraft at Mangalore. In fact, I was speaking to an engineer today who would like to come on our program and actually have a conversation about those aircraft involved in that mid-air, as he has some pretty revealing information. But the general makeup of that conversation was that this data should be shared. Now, I wrote a piece that basically said if these people can't come to the outcome themselves, CASA should simply step in and make it a requirement. So I know Baz may get the opportunity. So Baz Schaefer's involved in setting up and funding Oz Runways and getting it up and going. There's a number of business partners involved. But how about I issue the challenge right now? Baz, instead of putting $1 on the safety of pilots' lives, how about you just do the right thing and you open this data channel up with AvPlan and make an announcement to the aviation industry that you're not going to charge pilots for safety. You're going to use your product to support safety. And that's the responsible thing to do. And I certainly would be publicly encouraging him to not waste any time, come out with a public statement, be very clear. Will Oz Runways make the data available to improve safety, or do you intend on charging people for that safety feature? Just come out and let everyone know what you're going to do. I hope you just open the data up. Bevan Anderson has given his undertaking that he wants to do this, and he wants to do it as fast as possible. So let's see if Oz Runways can match that challenge and get on with it and improve safety for everyone across the aviation industry. And I hope you do, Baz. It'd be a great opportunity to show your support for pilots nationwide. Okay, well, Clinton, that basically covers us on ADSB, which brings us to our last topic for tonight. Mindful of our time, we're going to try and keep ourselves as close to an hour as possible. And that is the unfolding situation at Mudgee Aerodrome. Now, I have to say this, in all the time that I've been with AOPA, there's only been a handful of locations in Australia that I've seen the situation on the grassroots, on the airfield, so to speak, devolve into real acrimony. And what unfortunately I'm hearing through very clear communication, and I know you're probably just nodding there because you're receiving emails as much as I am on this issue, but wow, we really have a problem at Mudgee Airport, and it all seems to start roughly at the time that the last ARO resigned. He was with the airfield for many, many years. He had built and fostered wonderful relations with local pilots and aviation businesses and visiting pilots. And the airfield for many, many years was just so highly regarded across the aviation industry as being a real standout location. I'll bring a slide up on screen, just gives you a shot of Mudgee Airfield. You've got a sealed runway, you have a grass runway which crosses, and you have this wonderful hangar home complex which has been built, which is like a beautiful aviation getaway hotel on the airfield that's privately owned, and they're always hosting events and activities and encouraging aviators to come and stay. It's a location where so many aviators have been to. Mudgee, of course, is a fantastic region and a fantastic gateway to a whole bunch of recreation and fun, but quite sadly, since the appointment of the new ARO, the entire situation at Mudgee seems to be going downhill rather quickly. And we're now starting to see a whole raft of complaints being lodged of pilots alleging serious safety breaches and incursions and other nonsense at the airport site that all really seem to centre around the behaviour of the airport management and ARO.
Yeah, I've not seen anything like it before. I've been to a couple of places where there've been people keen on seeing ASIC cards and that sort of thing, but certainly not anything to the extent of, and I've seen videos and I've heard, you've seen some of this stuff, where a person on the ground, it seems to be actively intervening in operational matters while they're occurring, and like in relation to aircraft in the air and aircraft on the ground. And I just think that there are some real safety issues as well as legal issues here, and liability issues for the council. But I've not seen anything like it before. I know there was some confusion caused by a response that CASA gave about aerodrome standards, and the council keeps citing the 2019 Part 139 MOS, and they keep quoting that without recognising that there are provisions in it for grandfathered aerodromes, of which Mudgee is one, which means a bunch of standards about runway OLSs and that actually don't apply. But then the follow-up correspondence with CASA said, "Oh no, this has got nothing to do with the MOS. It's about operational procedures that are determined by the local aerodrome operator." So you've got one part of the organisation arguing about the MOS Part 139 based upon what CASA said at one level, and then the real answer appears to be something that someone else at CASA said. So it's this whole whole miasma of mess, which is completely unnecessary. I mean, completely unnecessary, because Mudgee's been operated as an aerodrome for a long time, and aircraft that take off and land haven't changed that much in that time, and the runways are still there, and the earth continues to turn.
It's Clinton, it's a crazy situation up there. I had the opportunity to speak to the ARO and contacted him to firstly introduce myself, but also to let him know that the number of complaints that I've received in the last 6 to 8 months has just been skyrocketing, and that it's not. And I will say, his initial reaction was, "I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we've never received any complaints." Yet I have copies of the correspondence that has been formally submitted. So playing that game was, we're off to a great start here. Deny. But obviously seeking to try and assist him in understanding that transitioning from being a bouncer at a local bar to becoming an ARO of an airfield in a very short space of time, and learning all of the necessary facets and skills and knowledge that's required to effectively manage an aerodrome is not easy at the best of times, let alone, I imagine, for his situation. And I'm not saying he's incapable of learning it, but let's face it, if you've spent your time being a bouncer at a pub and now you're becoming an ARO of an airport, I would dare say there is going to be a subtle difference in the types of responsibilities and understandings you require. That said, as I have also sought to explain to the ARO, that yes, as a registered aerodrome, there are going to be some limitations, but it does not mean you can't do the kinds of things that you do at an unlicensed ALA. It means you need to have an understanding. And I was quite shocked to hear that the ARO simply threw back and said, "Well, I've only acted on advice given to me by CASA." And I challenged that, saying I'd love to see that advice, because I've not known CASA in all the years that I've been doing this to ever put anything in writing directing an ARO or a council to do anything with their aerodrome. So as I've said to the ARO, I'd love an opportunity for AOPA to sit and to meet with him. That request was resulted in me being told I needed to reach out and speak to his boss, which I have done. I've called him and I've made clear that obviously AOPA's called on to be involved in this issue. We're a representative organisation with an enormous amount of knowledge and skill and expertise around general aviation matters, and that our members are having a really difficult time, and many of the complaints that are being raised, they're serious. I mean, we've got complaints from pilots saying that they've been chased on the aerodrome with vehicles, that vehicles have been driven in front of aircraft, that the ARO is directing traffic in the circuit. The ARO is actually contacting aircraft saying don't land, all this nonsense that it seems to be going on, which I imagine probably comes down to a lack of experience for the ARO, not understanding that these types of things lead to fatalities in aviation and are very unsafe and shouldn't be happening. So we sought an opportunity to speak to his boss to say, well, we do need to meet and we do need to discuss it because it's on the radar now. Quite interestingly, there was a bit of a denial from him as well that there's a problem. And in fact, he was very, very quick to fire off and to say that the problems at Mudgee Airport simply stem from rogue pilots. Apparently, Mudgee's just full of rogue pilots who are all breaking the rules, and that council's trying to deal with very difficult situations of pilots just out there being completely lawless. So that was an interesting response. So I think AOPA's next step, Clinton, will be that we need to go up and we need to engage with this council and we need to hose the situation down somewhat. And I use that language because quite probably what's going on now is we have a situation where the ARO has managed to get the flying community offside. There's no doubt that because of that, the flying community now has no interest in the ARO being on side. And I imagine it must get very frustrating as professional aviators who've invested a lot of time, effort and money into their pursuits to be pulled up by a former bouncer come ARO holding the CASA book and demanding that everyone do the letter of the LAW when that person themselves doesn't seem to really understand what many of these facets are about. So obviously, I believe there's a council have taken the initiative to put together a bit of an information session, which is coming up. I think you and I are both going to go and attend that, if I'm correct.
Yeah, well, we've got an invitation. I don't know whether I'll be around, but I'll try and get there. I mean, I flew up to Mudgee a couple of weeks ago, so I count as a user. I think I'm allowed to fly in there, so it'll be interesting to attend. So I'll get there if I can. They should do what they did with Cootamundra and set up for virtual participation as well. But anyway, we could suggest that when we get there.
Well, there's a couple of things that need to happen. They need to get an airport advisory committee up and going. Now the council has to start the heavy work of rebuilding the relationship between the flying community, the airport community, the visiting community, and the council themselves. I'd be urging the councillors to be taking a strong interest in what's happening on the ground at the airport. Ultimately, as I said to both the ARO and the airport manager up there, AOPA has been around for 80 years. We know what we're talking about, and I dare say we'll outlast their ARO and their airport manager on these aviation safety issues. And if they think it's just going to disappear and they're going to silence the industry by playing hardball, I dare say that's not exactly a viable strategy either, because we can make things extremely difficult if the situation with the council is that they simply want to ignore the fact that the way that they're discharging their responsibilities is not consistent with safety and best practice of management. So as I said to the airport manager, it's not a threat. AOPA doesn't threaten people, but we certainly explain how things will work if we're forced into a situation, into a very big public battle over maintaining safety at the site, amenity and access for Mudgee Airport. And I say I'm lost at the moment with it because frankly, this has never been an airfield that has ever come on the national radar for anything like this. Mudgee has always been known as being a great place to fly away to, and it has had such a sterling reputation. And I'm a little shocked that the council's let it get as far as it has, and I'm hopeful with a little bit of awareness that this is going to calm down and we'll get some sensible outcomes. So for everyone, and I noticed Dan Compton from Dubbo has just chimed in on one of the comments, and I know there's a few others that'll be watching from Mudgee. We are working on this issue. We ask that everyone try and maintain a cool head at that location, and we'll work through it as much as we possibly can, because ultimately we just want to get it fixed.
Yeah,
and Dan's obviously...
I wrote to CASA today on the radio issue because I said, I don't know where the authority comes from for someone not sitting in an aircraft but sitting in a car can make broadcasts on aviation frequencies of the kind, or of any kind. I can imagine an ARO, making a broadcast. I'm crossing runway 34 with my flashing lights, just so people in the area know about it. But in terms of purporting to tell people where they can go, literally, and can't go, I thought that's what's called air traffic control, provided by air traffic controllers who are licensed and employed by an air navigation service provider, not somebody driving around in a Toyota Hiace with flashing lights on it. But anyway, we'll see what I said. It's extraordinary. I haven't seen anything like it before.
Well, it really is kind of it's just bizarre. I really don't know what to say about it other than Mudgee's got Mudgee does not want to be damaging its reputation. It's just got such a great reputation for in reality, and with regard to our flying community and our aviation industry. Let's protect that. Let's make sure that the region remains a great gateway and that we don't end up with pilots having such bad experiences. So I'll make sure that the council gets a copy of this video, and I really do appeal to the councillors and to the council management that there's got to be a better way to resolve this than having someone running around the airport acting like Cartman out of South Park and demanding that they respect their authority. So, let's get real. Let's get back to the basics of running a really good airport with a great reputation and put this nonsense behind us. Well, thank you, Clinton, for joining us again for AOPA Live. You've become like a stalwart regular of the program, and I need to address the elephant in the room. Where's Glenn Buckley? I have promised to bring Glenn Buckley before an AOPA Live now for many weeks, and I just want to share a little bit of information with everybody. There's this next interview that we're going to do with Glenn Buckley is a very serious interview. And the purpose of the interview is to lay out a raft of, statements and evidence in relation to his particular situation. And there are, along with Glenn, there's potentially another guest who will join us for that discussion, who may be able to provide some very clear statements in relation to what CASA did know during its time, and that as it has been presented to AOPA, the allegation is that that information entirely contradicts the evidence that CASA have given the Ombudsman in relation to this matter. Now, I'm usually pretty trigger happy in pulling any participant onto a program and having this conversation, but the AOPA Australia Board are just requesting that we step through this process very clearly in order to gain a thorough understanding of exactly what we'll be putting to air. And we also would like to give CASA the opportunity to be aware of the information that we're going to present, and to give them an opportunity to also participate and provide their perspective if they choose to do so. And so I just wanted to let people know, I've been asked a couple of times today, would this be happening tonight? We will be advising in plenty of notice for that particular broadcast via Facebook post notices, and also via social media and other websites to let people know that that program is going to be airing. I thoroughly imagine it's going to be of significant interest to a great number of people, including a great number of people inside of CASA. And so I think that's where we're at, unless you've got anything else you can add to that, Clinton.
No, we'll keep working with Glenn to see what the way forward is and get it all sorted when we can.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Clinton, and have a good evening.
You too. Safe flying, everyone.
Okay, well, that was Clinton McKenzie covering off on the ADSB for VFR fitment, and also the unfolding situation at Mudgee Airfield, in which we send out our regards to all of our local aviators and members up there in the region. If you have tuned into tonight's broadcast, we thoroughly appreciate it, and we extend our sincere thanks for you supporting AOPA through your viewing. But I say this at the end of every single broadcast. People by now would be able to almost read this out for me word for word. If you like the work that AOPA Australia is doing, not only to fight for your rights as a pilot and as an aircraft owner, as an aviation business person, but also the work that we do in helping build awareness and understanding of the issues and the topics as they are unfolding across the aviation industry, then I thoroughly recommend you jump online to www.aopa.com.au/membership. Now, at Saturday's presentation at Wagga City Aero Club, I made the comment, and I might just quickly run through it with you all here this evening. I'd like you to just think about the issues that we are facing as aircraft owners and as pilots and people in this great aviation industry, and ask yourself in total honesty, who can you name, either as an individual or as an organisation, that is out there fighting to ensure that your rights in this industry and that your future participation in this industry can be assured and protected? Think about that. Who is out there doing this work? Now, if you can't think of someone other than AOPA and you're not currently a member of this association, how about you jump online and pledge your support? We are for you. Unashamedly, we are for you. We're here fighting for this industry because we believe in you. And we do it wholeheartedly because we care about general aviation and we want to make sure that general aviation has a future in this country. I've dedicated 7 odd years of my life to it. I don't get paid a great deal of money to do it, but I do it because I genuinely care about what is going to happen to this industry. And I'm fighting and doing everything I can to see to it that we have an aviation future together. So please give consideration to jumping online to AOPA and becoming a member. Your $159 helps put fuel in the tanks that enables us not only to get to meetings, it enables us to process our freedom of information requests, it allows us to go out and seek opinions, it allows us to get to and from. It is essential. It's the lifeblood that we need as an association in order to protect the rights of aviators. And I know my friends up at Mudgee would understand exactly what I'm talking about, those at Gympie when we saved the runway from being shortened, and a myriad of other locations where we've done great work. Every single Cessna aircraft owner in this country in which we were able to work absolutely feverishly to get the Cessna SIDS situation repealed for private owners so that you weren't all being bankrupted by SIDS coming due at one point in time. All of this great work has been done by this little association on an extremely limited budget. We've had to make the little that we have go a great distance. Imagine what we could do if tens of thousands of pilots piled into AOPA and gave us the financial tools and resources to fight these fights at full force and not have one Ben Morgan, but have 25 Ben Morgans out there fighting at every state level possible for positive change. Now, you don't always have to agree with everything that AOPA Australia gets itself involved in, but I guarantee we can all agree that our rights to participate in this industry are worth protecting. And for that point alone, I welcome you to stand with me as a member of AOPA Australia and proudly support a future for general aviation. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. I'm Ben Morgan, and I hope to see you all in our next broadcast next week. Thank you and good night.